Hello and welcome to the Mindful Men podcast, a show inspiring men to be mindful about their lives. Each week, we'll dive into a range of topics that matter to men and hear from everyday people doing extraordinary things. So if you love the show, please give it a 5-star rating and share it with your mates. Now, before we get into this week's episode, please note that some of the content may trigger you. And if this happens, please reach out to your support networks. It's really important. If you can't get enough of Mindful Men, head over to our website. It's www.mindful-men.com.au. Find the show notes and the links to our socials there. But for now, sit back, relax, and let's get mindful. G'day guys, and welcome to another episode of the Mindful Men podcast. I'm your host Simon Rinnie, and today we're getting mindful about challenging all those negative thoughts, feelings and behaviours with a phrase called, "Is this helpful?" Now, this is a new tool that I've got in my mental health toolkit, and it came about through my discussions with my business wellness coach. So I'm in Queensland, and for small businesses, we're able to access a wellness coach to talk about all the challenges associated with small business, and that's a free service. So if you're in small business in Queensland and you have been struggling, make sure you check them out. Google small business wellness coaching and it comes up. And I've been using this service for a few months now and really enjoy sitting down with my coach and discussing all the challenges with business, and I guess reconnecting with the positive thoughts about business, because business is stressful. And I've never had a business outside of Mindful Men, and 2 years in, I'm feeling it. Like, I am really feeling it. I know some of you out there have small businesses and are probably feeling similar too. So I'm going to teach you, or talk about, should I say, the phrase, "Is this helpful?" And I'm going to highlight how I've been using it in my own journey, both in my mental health journey, but also in my business journey. I'm going to highlight how some of my clients are using this toolkit at the moment and what I'm doing to support them in their journeys. And then I'm going to give you the exact blueprint of how you can use it in your own journey. So make sure you stick around right to the end, because we'll go through that and I'll give it a good summary with how I have been using it in my surfing as well. So stick around, because you all know I love a good surf chat. So to give this some context, I'm in small business. Mindful Men is not just a podcast, it's a therapy business or a wellness business, predominantly here in Australia, but I do have overseas listeners, and I am working on some coaching programs for my international listeners as well. So watch this space. But in the last few months, my mental health has been on a big decline. Like, I'm talking big. In fact, it's been so big, I'm actually feeling the most depressed and the most anxious I have in quite a while. And that's probably several years since maybe before I started Mindful Men. So things are coming to a bit of a pointy end for me in my mental health. And it's okay. I'm talking about it, and it's important that we talk about it. So it's not a look at me moment. It's actually me saying, hey, I'm struggling, and it's okay to struggle too. But it's been on a bit of a decline, and there's a few reasons for that. One is the business. So business is stressful. It's not running in 2024 as well as it was running at the end of 2023. By the end of last year, I was so run off my feet, I couldn't keep up. I had clients wanting to book in that I had to say, I had a wait list essentially. I say, I'll get back to you in the new year. I had reports to write. I was left, right, center, all over the place. And that was great. But at the end of last year, I was absolutely buggered. And I kind of expected that to continue into 2024, but it didn't. And so this has been challenging me. It's like, what's going on? Where's the referrals? Why have they dried up, for example? Some of my clients have finished at the end of 2023. And so I've said goodbye to them. And that's a fantastic thing in the therapy space. But at the same time, it leaves a hole in my calendar. So I'm like scratching my head, like, where's the next referral? Or who can I plonk in there? And it hasn't quite worked out just the way that I had imagined it. And so I've been getting in these negative loop cycles and getting myself down, really, not really looking at all the positives. I'm just looking at the negatives that are coming up. Another example is I'm redeveloping my website, and I'm working with a provider to do that. And I recently got the first, version of what the new website might look like, and it didn't really meet the brief that I gave them, and I spiraled. I'm like, whoa, this is just not what I wanted. And part of the reason for that is I get triggered, or I guess I have negative thoughts, feelings, and behaviors associated with money. Now, the website isn't cheap. It's quite a lot of money. And so to receive that first, I guess, version of that, knowing that I'm investing a lot of money in this really set me off. And that money trigger comes from a long way back. It comes from when I was in my childhood. Mum and dad had a business that started off well, but it ultimately bombed. And there was a lot of negative discussions around money in the household. So I think I've held on to that trauma from when I was a child, because I used to hear all the arguments about money and it used to really get me down, but I've kind of held on to that, and it's seeped into my mindset when it comes to money, and particularly business and money. It's something that really does get me. And so to get that website and knowing that I'm investing a lot of money has triggered me, and it's put me down into that spiral. But it's not just business as well. We are also moving house. So a few months ago, we sold our house and we've been living in temporary accommodation while we find something else. And so this has been wonderful from the perspective that we're in a resort, which is really nice. We're on the beach, which means I get to do a few more surf sessions through my week, but it's not home. And so everything's still in boxes. We've got some stuff in storage, some stuff with us. It is a bit tight. We're in a 3-bedroom apartment as opposed to a 4-bedroom house that we had before. Our dog's in long-term care as well. So we haven't seen our little puppy. She's not a puppy anymore. She's pretty old, but our dog Gracie, we haven't seen her for a while. And so feeling disconnected, disjointed, out of routine, this is getting me down. I'm a man that loves routine. And this is really important for my well-being, because when I've got routine, I've got structure, I can have a clear vision for the future. I feel well. But at the moment, everything's a bit murky, both from a business and a housing perspective for us, and it's impacting me. And so I've been bringing a lot of this up in my wellness coaching sessions. And I talk a lot about stress and anxiety of not having enough time. I feel like I'm failing at business. I feel like I'm failing as a father and a husband because of the housing situation, which this is not all on me. But in my mind, this is what seeps in. I look at my calendar for the week and, if there's one cancellation, it just throws my day. Or if something happens that I wasn't expecting, it throws my day. And I think it's because I'm heightened at the moment. I'm going into supervision and I'm talking to my supervisor about stress, anxiety, worry. I'm not really seeing the bigger picture and the positive things. I'm not seeing the growth in the guys that I'm working with at the moment. I'm there and I'm helping with them, but I'm not seeing that. I'm not really cherishing it because I'm in my own head. I'm not seeing the clients that are repeat clients and they keep coming back. I'm kind of on autopilot there. And I talk a lot about being on autopilot from a mindfulness perspective. In my therapy space, I'm living a little bit on autopilot just to get myself through. And this is the challenge of small business. It's not the fact that I don't like being a therapist or anything like that. It's just like there's a lot of stresses when it comes to small business and me also being the only person in that business. So I'm the therapist, I'm the marketer, the admin guy, the finance guy, and all these things are playing in my head. And so I'm offloading a lot of this to my business wellness coach. And he does a great job of sitting there and listening to me download every time that we catch up. But that's a sign of a good therapist, a good coach. He's also a therapist as well. He's trained in the mental health space. And that's why I think I get along with him so well, because we can talk about therapy from a small business perspective, but also from a wellness perspective and using the tools and the theories as well. So these are the things that are coming up. And often he would say to me, Simon, are these thoughts that you're having around your business or your feelings that you're having around the business or the behaviors, because we also talk about OCD or me stressing or the behaviors that I'm not doing, things like self-care, is what I'm doing right now, thinking, feeling, behaving, is this helpful? And often I'd say, no, it's not helpful. I'm not feeling the vibe. I'm not feeling great. I'm not feeling good. I'm not feeling positive. Even that in itself, he would say, Simon, is this helpful? And we've had this discussion multiple times, but it's starting to sink in. And I'm starting to realize that, hey, actually, this is a powerful phrase that we can use to challenge these negative mindsets or these feelings that we're having or the behaviors that we're having that are no longer serving us. Now, sometimes it is important to have negative thoughts, feelings, and behaviors because they help us to tune into how we're feeling, how we're going, how we're tracking. But what we don't want to do is hold on to them. And sometimes we do hold on to them because they ultimately become kind of like a safety blanket. And we wrap them around ourselves. They make us feel tight. They make us feel secure. Even though they're quite negative, it becomes the devil that we know. And I've been living a mental health story for over 3 decades. And so sometimes I actually feel like, are my thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, is this a form of a safety blanket that I feel is helpful, but in reality, it's not helpful and keeps me stuck in the loop of a mental health challenge. It's always a loop. And sometimes that loop is very small, but sometimes that loop is very big as well. So I'm starting to ask myself, through the guidance of my coach, is this helpful? And so I think the first time I did this was actually around my OCD. And for anyone who knows my story, knows that I have a checking style of OCD. I check my doors, windows, etc., because I'm worried about people getting in, or even the kids getting out, maybe sleepwalking, for example, and walking outside the front door. I worry about this type of stuff. So I'm always checking that things are locked, particularly at nighttime when I'm not awake. It's not so bad in the daytime, but at nighttime it's really bad. And so the first time I used this phrase, is this helpful, was me checking the front door of this resort. So to get into the resort, you need a fob key. So you can't get in without a key in the first place unless someone buzzes you in. And that door that's downstairs is locked. You cannot get into it no matter how hard you wiggle it or whatever. And so I know this, but I'm still finding myself, even though we're up a couple of levels, you've got to get into an elevator and then you've got to figure out which house or apartment that we're in. There's a few steps to go. It's not like I just live in a house on the street that you can just identify the house, go up to the front door or window or whatever and get yourself in. There's a few steps to get into this resort. And so I'm finding, even though I know that, and I do feel really safe here because of all those steps that you've got to take to get to our unit, and there's only one way into our unit, through that front door, I'm still finding myself checking. And this is the OCD, this is anxiety that's coming up for me. And so I remember one night I said to myself in the middle of the night, checking again for I don't know how many times that night, Simon, is this helpful? Is checking this door helpful? And the response I said to myself is, no, it's not helpful. It's keeping me out of bed. It's keeping me awake. I actually want to go to bed. I don't want to be checking this door again and again and again. And when I did that, it's funny. It felt like the emotional brain, or the automatic brain where OCD comes out for me, switched off and my rational brain came on, because I was able to problem solve in that moment. Simon, the door was locked. I live in a resort. It's really hard to get into the resort, up to my unit, and then into our house or apartment. And that enabled me to switch off the emotional brain, switch on rational brain, and go back to bed and then not check. And I'm like, oh, that was actually really good. That's the first time I've used that phrase. My business coach says it a lot to me, but it's the first time I used it and it worked. I'm like, okay, all right, I've got this. And so I did that a few more times, and I have kept doing it. In fact, I find it a really powerful tool when I'm checking a lot with my OCD. But then it starts coming into thinking about my business. And so, for example, when a bill comes in, I often get triggered. Oh no, this is another finance thing. This is a money thing, a bill that I've got to pay, and I've got to find the money from somewhere. And I guess this is amplified at the moment because I don't have as many clients as I did at the end of last year. And so I'm always worried, am I going to have enough money at the end of the fortnight to pay myself my basic wage? Am I going to have enough money to put aside for tax? All these types of things. And so when a bill comes in, even though if I know the bill's coming, it triggers this thing in my head. And so one of the things I've been saying to myself when a bill comes in is, Simon, is this helpful? Is it helpful to be worried so much about money? And I could just look at my other accounts that I've got linked in and go, you know what? If I'm a bit short this fortnight, I've got a bit of money in my tax account that I've been saving for the end of the financial year, or I've got a bit of money saved in my expenses account, or maybe I just need to get on the phone or the emails and start driving up some more clients so that I'm not feeling like this. So I'm switching on that rational thinking brain as opposed to sitting in the emotional brain and worrying and starting to problem solve the situation. So I've started to use it on my finances, which has been really cool. But then I've started using it with my clients, and this has been really powerful because they're actually like, oh, this is a really easy tool to use for our own mental health toolkits. And so I'll give you some examples of some of the things that the guys that I'm working with are bringing up in their sessions. And these are quite generic. So no, it's interesting because a lot of my clients, they talk about similar things. So this is not specific to one person out there, but things are like playing out situations in their heads on repeat. And I can attest to that because an OCD brain like mine thinks about things on rumination. And so some of my clients, they're overthinking things. And so when they're telling me their stories, and it might be the same story that I've heard over multiple sessions, I'll prompt them and say, I'm hearing these stories. They're on repeat. Is being on repeat helpful? And often they'll say no. They say that I'm stuck in this loop. I'm like, okay, we're identifying that it's not helpful. So let's work on some strategies to park those ruminating thoughts and move forward. Another one is always looking for the problems and not the solutions. And again, I can attest to this. This is what I'm doing. I'm looking at all the problems and I'm stuck in those negative thought patterns and feeling patterns and behavior patterns. And that comes from living in that emotional brain. But again, I ask the question, is this helpful? And it switches off that emotional brain and switches on the rational brain. And so we start thinking about the solutions as opposed to the problems. Another one is always wanting to be right, or always wanting to be first, or the winner, or whatever it is. And so again, I'm asking the question, is that helpful? Is that a helpful behavior? Or is that a helpful thought that you've got in your head that's driving this need to be the one who's right? Whether it's an argument with the partner, whether it's an argument with a friend, whether it's a situation in which they have no actual control in, but they're trying to outsmart the other person that's causing them some grief. Is this helpful? And often the answer is no. It's not helpful. It doesn't allow them to live that best life that they want to live. It keeps them stuck in a negative thought, feeling, or behavior pattern. Another one quite common is the drugs and alcohol. Is using, or should I say, not overusing, but using drugs and alcohol actually helpful for their anxiety, or to manage their stress, or to problem solve issues that are happening in their lives? And often it's the band-aid, it's the deflection, it's the coping mechanism, it's the safety blanket. So again, the question is drinking or taking drugs helpful for you to overcome this challenge or that challenge? Another one, and these are quite basic, the next couple, is having a poor diet helpful? Is poor sleep helpful? And is no exercise or limited exercise helpful? These three things come to self-care, the very basics of being well. If we're eating right, we're drinking lots of water, if we're sleeping better, if we're exercising, we tend to feel good about ourselves. We're able to have more energy. We're able to manage our emotions a lot better. But when we're not doing these things, again, the emotional brain is switched on. It's in hyperdrive. We're in those negative thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. So again, the question I ask to my clients is, are these behaviors helpful? Are the thought patterns that are associated with these helpful? When they're driving home from work and it's been a stressful day, is it helpful to go to the pub and have a beer? Is it helpful to get takeaway instead of going home and actually cooking a healthy meal? Is it helpful to be doom scrolling on TikTok in the middle of the night or other social media in the middle of the night rather than just going to bed and getting a good night's sleep? Is it helpful sitting on the couch and watching TV and comfort eating instead of maybe going for a walk or having a great conversation with your partner or going to bed? Is this helpful? Whatever the thought, the feeling is, the behavior is it helpful at all? And so the guys that I'm working with are taking this phrase and going, you know what? I'm going to ask this to myself every single time I have one of these thoughts, feelings, behaviors that I'm noticing I'm doing quite a lot of. We're still going to have negative thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. That's a given every single day. It's just about how we reframe that. How do we challenge that? How do we move past that in order to live a life full of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that are actually going to serve us, in our purpose? And so these are some examples for my life that have been coming up, but also some of the lives of my clients. But I wanted to touch on one that's happening with my wife. Anyone who's watched the news recently, and to timestamp this, I'm talking about this in April. So recently in Australia, we've had some pretty big events happening. We had what happened in Sydney at the shopping centre with some stabbing. We had a similar incident at a church recently. These are quite uncommon things to happen in Australia, and it's really impacted the community in terms of feelings of safety, worry. There's a lot of talk about mental health conditions. There's also talk about terrorism and stuff like that. Some big issues happening in Australia. And so my wife has been caught, particularly around the shopping centre incident, because there was a mother and a child, a baby, a 9-month-old baby that were caught in that. And the mother actually died as a result of being stabbed, and the baby got cut as well, got stabbed and ended up in hospital in some surgery. And my wife, being a mother, she was stuck in a bit of a negative loop because she'd been looking through social media and seeing all these, videos or content relating to that incident. And one of the first things I said to her was, is it helpful for you to look through that? And she said, well, I just feel so bad for them. I'm so sad. I'm upset. I'm crying as I go through. And I'm like, you can still feel bad for the situation and bad for that mother and bad for that baby and all the people associated with that. But is it helpful actually engaging with the social media content? Is it helpful engaging with the news around that? Because what it's doing is creating a negative thought, feeling, and behavior in your mind and in your body. And that's not helping you. That's not serving you. And so from there, I think I encouraged my wife to kind of disconnect from it. And we haven't spoken about it for a few days, which I'm hopeful that she's moved on. But I know other people are doing the same as well. I do the same. I get caught in reading up about bad news. One that I've been caught up reading is this things happening over in Israel with Iran as well, and what the US are thinking about as well. And so I've been prompted, are we moving towards a big global war? Are we looking at World War III? And I started thinking about that type of stuff. And I've actually caught myself thinking about that stuff too much and scrolling through my phone, looking at news articles too much, that I've asked myself, Simon, is this helpful? Is it helpful to be doing this at 11 o'clock at night when you're exhausted and you should be asleep? And the answer usually or always is for me, no, it's not helpful. So I switched it off and feeling better about myself again, switching off that emotional brain, switching on rational brain and moving forward. So there's some examples from me personally, work, and also my wife as well. And I dare say some of those things are happening in your life or maybe in the lives of people that you love or hold dear to you. So now I'm going to teach you exactly how to use this tool. And it is very simple. It is as simple as asking yourself, is this helpful? But I'm going to give you a 4-step process to do this so that you can walk away from this episode and start using it in your everyday life. You don't need to be a trained therapist to ask yourself, is this helpful? So the first thing is, the reason that we're going to do this is recognizing what's going on in our minds and bodies. And then we're going to look at this and going, how is this impacting me? Is this impacting me in a positive or negative way? And usually it's in the negative. So once we can conceptualize the tool, that's the tool we're going to use. Is this negative? And how can we shift? How can we challenge those thoughts, feelings, behaviors and shift so that we don't get stuck in the rut, basically? And so here's the 4 steps on how we can do this with this tool. Is this helpful? Step 1 is acknowledge it. Oh, I love this thing, is acknowledging anything in terms of our mental health is a way that we can start taming things. So we've got to name it to tame it, acknowledge it to tame it. So the question you ask yourself is, when you notice what's going on, maybe a thought, a feeling, or a behavior, is name it. Oh, I'm thinking this again. I'm thinking this negative thought again around money or around my partner or around my kids, or around my work, around my social circles, around what happens in the news. I'm thinking about it. Or, I'm feeling this thought again. Or I'm feeling this feeling again, should I say. I'm feeling this anxiety. I'm anxious, or I'm stressed. I'm feeling stressed. I'm stressed. And we start associating with ourselves. I'm feeling this thing in my belly. Oh no, I've got gastro. I'm feeling gastro. I've got gastro. Like, when we think about things or think about feelings, we can amplify them to be bigger than what they actually are. Or I'm doing this again. I'm looking at that door again. I'm checking the front door that it's locked. Or I'm doom scrolling again in social media. Or I'm drinking again. Or I'm taking drugs again. Or I'm getting shitty at other people again. I'm thinking, feeling, doing. I'm behaving in these ways. I'm acknowledging it. I'm going to name it. I'm doing these things, thinking these things. This is the first step. Step number 2, identify how we want to think, feel, and behave. So I'm doing this thing again. I'm thinking this negative thought about money, but I don't want to do that anymore. I want to think positively about money. Or I'm standing at the front door checking that it's locked again for the 10th time in a row. I don't want to do this. I want to check it once and go to bed. Or I'm feeling this anxiety again. So we can reframe that and go, I actually want to not feel anxiety. Or maybe I want to recognize that anxiety can actually be excitement. And those two can often get intertwined and cause us to come unstuck when we think of it as an anxious feeling as opposed to an exciting feeling. So we've identified what the situation is or the issue is, the negative thought, feeling, and behavior. We've named it. We've identified an alternative we want to do. And now the key question, step 3, ask yourself out loud or in your head. I like to do it out loud because that externalizes the situation. Is this helpful? Is this thought helpful? Is this feeling helpful? Or is this behavior helpful? And in majority of cases, it's generally a no, this is not helpful. With the caveat that sometimes feelings, thoughts, or behaviors can be helpful to identify that something's going on, but it's not going to help us to live the life that we want to live. It's going to keep us down. We want to bring ourselves up. And so in order to bring ourselves up, we've got to recognize that the thought, feeling, or behavior is not helpful. So ask yourself that key question, is this helpful? And step 4, the final step in this 4-step process is tame it. So we've got to name it to tame it. So we've named it already. We've named an alternative that we want to feel. We've asked ourselves, is this helpful? And now we're taming it. So how can we tame it? Well, by naming it, and identifying an alternative and then asking ourselves, is this helpful? We're switching on that rational brain. So we're switching off emotional brain. Some people call it the monkey brain. We're switching on the rational brain. And so we can start problem solving here. Is this helpful that I stress out about getting a bill in my inbox? No, it's not helpful. But paying the invoice is helpful because then it gets out of my invoice. I've done something about it. A very simple thing. Is it helpful for me to think of everything as negative? No, I actually want to think of things more positively. So I'm going to now think of 5 positive thoughts about this situation to help me overcome that negativity. Another way to do it. That's the rational brain problem solving. Another way is to ground ourselves. Can we be in the moment? Because often when we're thinking in a negative loop, for example, or we're behaving in a negative way, or we're feeling in a negative way, it's on cycle and we're not really in the moment, not really in that present moment. We might be thinking about the past, which can lead to depression, shame, guilt, all those types of negative feelings. Or we're often thinking in the future, anxiety, stress, worry, what if, what's going to happen? And so grounding ourselves in the moment, and you can do this using your 5 senses. What can you see? What can you touch, smell, taste, and hear around you to be in the here and now? So being in the here and now is really important to break out of the negative cycles that we're in. Start tuning into where we're at, who's around us, what we're seeing, what we're experiencing. And I'm going to give you a great example of this in a second, just before we leave. You could tell yourself some positive affirmations. It's going to be okay. I've got this. This is not helpful. All these types of positive affirmations can lift us up and can start to break down the negative thoughts that are running through our heads. An alternative to positive affirmations is gratitude. What are you grateful for in this moment or about this tricky situation? So me getting an unexpected bill, what am I grateful for is, I'm actually engaged with a service that's helping me to achieve a goal. So for example, my bookkeeper, I'm grateful when I do get an invoice because my bookkeeper is helping me with my bookkeeping because I hate finances. I struggle with it. So I'm grateful for them supporting me to do that. No, I don't like having to pay for that. And that's the negative aspect of it, but it's really positive that they're engaged with me, they're helping me out, growing my business in a way that is also by the books from a tax perspective, which is really helpful as well. Another one is we can talk to someone. So I'm talking to my business wellness coach who's giving me this tool. Is this helpful? I'm talking to my wife. I'm talking to my supervisor. I'm talking to my therapist as well. Talking to people that can help me through this period that I'm going through that is giving me these negative thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. And on that is maybe engaging in therapy or coaching. If you're not doing this already, engaging with a professional to help you see the rational and come out of that emotional brain that can help you to problem solve with this simple question, is this helpful? And so a great example of this before I let you go for today is, everyone knows I'm loving surfing, and I was out surfing on Wednesday morning. I always do it every Wednesday morning. But I was thinking about the website situation, and what was stuck in my head was I'd given the brief. The provider or the developer who was developing my website didn't hit that brief when they gave me the first version of it. And I started thinking about money. I'm like, I spent all this money, thousands of dollars, to pay this person to develop this awesome website for Mindful Men to take us out from the first 2 years and into the next 10 years. And it hasn't happened. And I was stuck on the money thing. I was like in my head. And what was happening around me was the surf was still happening. I was on my board. I was in the water, but I wasn't present in the moment. And so I named it. I said, Simon, you are thinking all these negative things about this website, which don't really need to happen right now. You've given them some feedback. You're going to connect with them. You're going to talk it through. It's okay. So there's some affirmation there. It's okay, Simon. It's going to be okay. And so I said, I want to be present on my surf. I identified an alternative. I love surfing. I love being out there. I want to be mindful in my surfing because it fills my cup. And so I said that to myself. And then I asked myself, Simon, is thinking about this website helpful right now because it's not allowing you to surf? Or it is allowing you to surf, but not consciously surf? I said, no, it's not. That enabled me to think about it rationally. I started thinking about problems or how we could address this problem, such as leaving it to 9 o'clock in the morning when I can give the developer a phone call and talk it through, or send them an email. I could set up a time to meet with them and actually go through in person what I'm actually hoping to achieve. And this allowed me to problem solve and then calm down. And then I went into my grounding processes. What could I feel? That cold water over my skin. or the sun coming onto my face? What could I see as the waves crashing in front of me, which was really important because it was a big surf day on Wednesday, and the waves were probably some of the biggest I've seen where I was surfing. Keeping in mind, I'm only a beginner, so I'm still waist deep or shoulder deep, and anything that's basically over my head looks like a mountain coming towards me. But it was pretty scary on Wednesday as well. Pretty big waves happening. But I wasn't present there. And so I started looking at the waves, hearing the sound of the waves, even tasting like my tongue, the saltness. It felt like I had been eating popcorn. If anyone's been to the beach for a while, after a while, it feels like you get that salty taste in your mouth. And I started really tuning into my senses to ground myself in the moment, to park these negative thoughts, feelings, and behaviors and start being present in my day. So noticing that this website issue, this finance issue associated with the website, and then ultimately the business, which is another stressor in itself, it wasn't helpful for me to be engaged in that. In that moment, it was helpful for me to be surfing, to fill my cup. And so that's an example of how I put that exact tool into process this week. And so you can do it too now. You've got this tool, this very powerful, this very simple tool for your mental health toolkit. And all you have to remember is this helpful? And so ask yourself, when you're feeling that negative thought, feeling, behavior, is this helpful? Is it helpful to be on social media in the middle of the night when you want to sleep? Is it helpful to have a late bedtime when you wake up every day tired? Is it helpful to eat bad food? Or is it helpful to drink or take too many drugs when you're trying to improve your mental health? Is it helpful not talking about things when you really want to start opening up and sharing what's going on inside? Is it helpful to be worried about yesterday when you can't change anything about what happened yesterday? Is it helpful to be stressed about tomorrow when tomorrow hasn't happened yet and we don't know what will happen tomorrow? These are things that you can ask yourself, and I implore you, start doing it today. Start doing this as a matter of practice, because the more you practice this, the better or easier it is to use when things go pear-shaped. So to recap, how to do that is 1, acknowledge it, name that thought, feeling, behavior. 2, identify an alternative that you want to be doing instead. 3, ask yourself, is this helpful? And number 4, tame it with a whole range of different tools, such as talking about it, grounding, positive affirmations, gratitude, therapy, or coaching. Well, that's it for me today, getting mindful about how we can challenge those negative thoughts, feelings, behaviors. If something's come up for you today that you want additional help with, Mindful Men is a therapy practice based here in Australia. Get in touch with us, because we can book you in for telehealth or in person in Southeast Queensland to go through things that are holding you back, that aren't serving you anymore. And we can ask each other, is this helpful? And we can give you a range of strategies to walk away with that go beyond this very podcast episode to get you living that life of conscious living and growing and thriving and not just merely surviving. So hit us up if that sounds like something you want to do. And if you are international, you're interested in Mindful Men's coaching, please get in contact with me. I'd like to design something that would suit you. And I'm looking to do that within the next, say, 6 to 12 months. So that will open up the door to working with people across the world from a coaching perspective, as opposed to a social work perspective, which is limited to here in Australia. I hope you're having a wonderful day wherever you are in the world. My name's Simon Rennie, and until next time, stay mindful. Well, that's a wrap for today's episode, and I hope you got some value from it. If anything triggered your mental health today, please reach out to your support networks. Also, if you loved what you heard, be sure to subscribe to the show and share it with your mates. For more from Mindful Men, you can check us out on Instagram and YouTube, and I'll throw the links to these pages in the show notes below. But until next time, stay mindful.